actually today, for the first time, I am using the recently released 2013 numbers. So I do apologize if I'm looking at this piece of paper quite often, as this is the first time that I've given this speech, and I don't want to mix it up with, you know, previous data and previous numbers and all that kind of good stuff. On my YouTube site and also on my website, you can find my talks from 2012 and 2011 data with pretty graphs and statistics and all that kind of good stuff. So let's get into this. Okay, so every year, the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film, they look at box office reports, and they look at the top 250 films in the box office, and they calculate women employed in key position roles. So today we're going to focus on directors, because it's actually a pretty in-depth report, and because of time and small room and all that kind of good stuff. So about 600 films are released to the box office every year, and we're only looking at the top 250. There's even thousands more that are released on demand, direct-to-video, film festivals only, etc. So, but for consistency, we're going to look at the top 250 findings from the Center of the Study. So I've got actually a handout. So I've got a couple of handouts. Thank goodness I didn't do a PowerPoint, so we'll pass those along as I chat and all that kind of good stuff. So last year, for 2013, female directors made up 6% of the top 250 films. The year before, it was 9%, and the year before that, it was 5%. So that means out of 250 films, really, of the top 250, only 15 films were directed by women last year. I don't know about you, but I have more films in my Netflix queue. I checked it up before I came here. I have 80 films in my Netflix queue. So 15 of them seemed quite low to me. So there is an argument that women don't get into directing because being a producer or a key behind-the-scenes position is more where it's at. Now, female employment in behind-the-scenes roles have stayed between 17 and 19% of the industry. It has dropped to 16% in 2013. That's directors, writers, producers, editors, and cinematographers combined. Every key position in this study, except for one, dropped from the year before. The only one that actually saw an increase, which I'm actually really excited about, was cinematographers. Cinematographers went from 2% to 3%, which is something that I think also should be talked about as well, but I do not have the experience for that. So there are 6% of female directors and 16% of the industry is female. Not so much of what you would call an equal opportunity employer. So I break up my talks into two sections, the Hollywood problem and the indie problem. So let's talk about the Hollywood problem for a bit. And that's looking at those 250 top grossing films, and let's examine female directors. So when I talk about the Hollywood problem, I'm talking about the big six. The big six own a whole bunch of other littler companies, and I will pass this bad boy around. The big six almost never change. They are Paramount, Warner Brothers, Sony, Disney, Universal, and Fox. And all their little bad boys as well as two. I know, there you go. So the big six, they only make up 25% of the movies that are released, but they dominate at the box office. Any given week, I'm giving you last weekend, and you're gonna see in the top 10, only 2 non-studio films actually made it into the top 10. Very rarely does any more than 2. Most of the time it's 1 is a non-big six studio in the top 10. So a lot of people are chiming in on this topic of why is there only 6% of female directors, and I am very eager to listen in because I do want to find a solution. So Susan Kartsanis, she ran Fox for 10 years. She suggests that we need more female-owned production companies, and that will create more female director opportunities. Now, as we saw in 2011, there was an increase in female production companies, but there was a decrease in female directors. Last year's producers actually stayed the same at about 25%, and executive producers saw a drop from 17 to 15. I also think this is creating a new problem, that if you have a female-owned production company and you're not looking for the best director for your material, you're looking at gender, you're perpetuating the problem. So I don't think that's going to solve it. Feminist Frequency says we need more female screenwriters to attract more female directors. The biggest drop on that chart that you'll see in 2012 came when it came to female writers. Once 15% of employment of the industry, Now only 10% are employed. It's actually, there's facts out there that say 95% of women break into the screenwriting industry with a romantic comedy. They are told, myself included, I've spent many years sending out Spec screenplays, that their scripts are too small, that they're not grand enough, that they're not expensive enough. I've had many a rejection letter for Spec screenplays. My favorite on the same script, it was an action-driven NASCAR script. One said that it was too big, too expensive. The other said that it was not big enough. Really kind of blew my mind a little bit there. But Hollywood agents are looking for the popcorn selling movies. They're looking for the summer blockbusters, the holiday picks for Oscar consideration, the spring family animation domination. And they actually aren't buying that many scripts either. According to the Scoggins report, has anybody ever heard of the Scoggins report? Yes, I love them. They track studios and big independents like Summit and Lionsgate. 110 Spec scripts were bought in total of last year. 30 of them were action-adventure, and 29 of them were thriller. So it has also been said that female directors will have more of them when it's proven that female-centered films make money. Does anybody want to guess the highest grossing film ever directed by a woman?
Barbra Streisand.
Twilight?
Twilight's a very good guess. It's number 3 domestically, but worldwide...
Hunger Games, what?
No, actually, worldwide.
Peace.
And it was also Hunger Games was directed by a dude. It's okay. You ready for this? It's mind-blowing. Kung Fu Panda 2. That's right. Anybody know it was directed by a woman in the first place? No. Jennifer Yeoh, that film made $637 million worldwide. Mamma Mia is number 2, directed by Phil Lloyd, that made $610 million worldwide. And Brave was really close. That was a co-directed effort. Anyone want to guess the highest grossing film co-directed by a woman that is not Brave? No? Frozen. Just came out this year. Believe it or not, $865 million this year. It is phenomenal. Yes. So now Meryl Streep, who I love, she has gotten into this debate. And she has said, quote, 5 little movies aimed at women have earned $1.6 billion. The Help, Iron Lady, Bridesmaids, Mamma Mia, and The Devil Wears Prada. The Iron Lady cost $14 million to make, and it brought in $114 million. That's pure profit. So why don't they want the money? It's also been said that female directors need to win more awards. The year that Catherine Bigelow won for Best Director for the Oscar for The Hurt Locker, female directors were at 7% of the industry. The next year, they dropped to 5%. Only 4 females have ever been nominated for the Best Director Oscar, and all but 1 were independent. Linda Warmuller for Seven Beauties was nominated in 1976 for independent foreign film. Jane Campion for The Piano in 1993 was Miramax. They were still independent, but bought by Disney a year later. Coppola for Lost in Translation in 2003. It was made independently, but it was distributed by Focus Features, which is owned in the US by Universal. And Catherine Bigelow, first woman ever to receive the Best Directing Oscar, her film was made outside the studio system. Jane Campion did go on to make Holy Smoke for Miramax when it was owned by Disney at the time. And Sofia Coppola did make Marie Antoinette for Columbia and Somewhere for Focus Features again. Warmiller and Bigelow, either by choice or lack of options, stayed in independence, and all 3 of these women that have been nominated for Best Director are now back in indies. They are currently making independent films. This year at the DGA, and this is 4 years after Catherine Bigelow's win, they now have a diversity award. And I quote, "It is given in recognition of the commitment to diversity hiring and providing jobs and opportunities to women and minorities in the DGA covered categories." 2 things. This is what my daughter says all the time. I have 2 things. Number 1, women are not the minority. Women are 51% of the population. Studies are showing that women are the main deciders on what tickets are bought at the theater. Women are 60% of the viral push on social media. Women account for 85% of all consumer purchases, including everything from autos to healthcare. But they are the minority when it comes to Hollywood. Number 2, the award went to 2 female producers of Scandal, and Betsy Spears and Shonda Rhimes. Rhimes said, we're a little pissed off that there needs to be an award. Like, there's such a lack of people hiring women and minorities that when someone does it on a regular basis, they're given an award. There you go. So there's an argument that there aren't enough women directors to even choose from. One Google search and you'll find lists and database and organizations that have resumes of professional female directors. There is even a women's steering committee meetings at the DGA, where according to director Lexi Alexander, wow, I love her, there have been heated arguments of who is responsible. The studio tried to put blame on the DGA and its own small number of female members, but the negotiation committee reminded the executives that a woman can only become eligible to join the guild if she gets hired by a signature company. So they're spending a lot of these meetings in circular logic, basically, everybody blaming each other. Now, Catherine Hardwicke, she directed the first Twilight. I always hate talking about Twilight. It just makes me cringe, like somewhere in my nether regions of just, oh God, Twilight. Because if you research female directors and female power at the box office, every time they bring up Twilight, and I'm like, that doesn't represent me as a person. But once the first Twilight made its $393 million, the second movie was directed by a man, and Hardwicke says she wasn't even considered to direct the second one. The third movie was directed by a different man, and Hardwicke says the same case in point, she wasn't even considered. Fourth movie, different dude, but he did hire to do the fifth because it was a part 1 and a part 2. Phil Lloyd, who before Kung Fu Panda 2, she was the highest grossing female director with Mamma Mia, and that brought in $610 million. She fought tooth and nail to get The Iron Lady made, which, by the way, it actually had 9 production companies attached to it because no one believed it enough to be the sole producer of it. She had 2 films back to back within a very small number of years that profited over $100 million each, and she does not have a studio deal, and she has no upcoming projects announced right now. So maybe Hardwicke and Lloyd aren't being hired because of this terrible story that Martha Coolidge brings up. Martha Coolidge is your director of awesome 80s movies like Real Genius. Yes, exactly. She says there's a story of a female president of a major studio who said no woman over 40 could possibly have the stamina to direct a feature film. I've heard people say that the kind of films that they want to make are too big and too tough for a female director. Those who honestly can't think that women can't handle responsibility of large budgets and demanding schedules should really start looking at, we've got Janet Yellen now, who is the head of the Fed, which is basically the most powerful position in our country, let me tell you. We've got Andrea Noah, who is the CEO of Pepsi, Virginia Romney, who is the CEO of IBM, Meg Whitman, who is the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, and I think if you ask them if that's true, Hollywood is very slow in realizing that women run billion-dollar companies every day. Sheryl Sandberg, who runs Facebook, which we all know, love, and abuse, right? Facebook is a $100 billion business, and if you compare that to your average $40 million movie and say that that women won't be able to lead and make the hard decisions, then I think that's a little bit of a joke. How many of you have seen Gravity? The Sandra Bullock? Okay, awesome. I want to point out what a big deal Gravity is, not the film, the fact that the film got made by Warner Brothers. Gravity was directed by Alfonso Cuarón, and it was written by him and his son. Gravity is his third project with Warner Brothers. He made Little Princess, Harry Potter, the Prisoner of Azkaban, and he did go on to Fox to make Great Expectations, Y Tu Mama Tambien, and for Universal he made City of Men. It's been documented of Cuarón's fight to have the lead character be female, and also it's been documented that he had even more fights to keep Sandra Bullock in the role. Cuarón's statements have always been unapologetic, saying that Mother Earth is in the background, so he felt that it made sense to the story to have a female character. But here's where the backstory with Warner Brothers, and it's one that has actually kind of shook the foundation of Hollywood as far as equality hiring. In 2007, the then president, Jeffrey Ronoff, decreed, "We are no longer making movies with females in the lead." This came after Jodie Foster's The Brave One and Nicole Kidman's The Invasion underperformed at the box office. Now, Warner Brothers has denied this comment, and it was quickly hushed under the rug in a weekend. However, if I look at the films that Warner Brothers has released before and after this comment, not accounting for films that are already in the pipeline, the year before his comment, they released 6 films with a female lead. After his comment, they released 4. The year after that, they did 2. The year after that, they did 2. And the year after that, they did 0. Out of 121 films Warner Brothers has released after the comments, only 8 of them have had a female lead. So whether or not it was said, there was a trickle-down effect that was happening. For the fact that Gravity actually got made by Warner Brothers is completely astounding. Also, the fact that Romanoff was let go from the Warner Brothers in June and Gravity was released in October also says something as well. With getting these films released with strong female leads like Gravity, like Hunger Games, and seeing them do well at the box office, it's a step. Getting the big 6 to recognize that movies that pass the Bechdel test make money versus those that don't pass the Bechdel test make significantly less money. But when I look at the films already announced by the big 6, because everything's about a year and a half ahead, we're looking at another significant drop from our 6% of female directors already looking at the big 6. So let's set aside the Hollywood problem for a second, and let's look at female directors in indie films. So indie films, it's a lot harder to track because filmfestival.com lists over 4,000 film festivals. Now the Center for the Study in Film and Television, they have not released their new data for this year, but I will pass out their data for last year. So this is a year old, but at least it still gives us some basis, and hopefully it goes up. We'll see. So what they did is they chose to look at 23 film festivals, and they chose them by prestige and by attendance and that sort of thing. And they list out what film festivals that they look at. And they went from August to August, so they gave it a full year. So our percentage of female directors in the Hollywood system were 6%, right? This study breaks it down by documentaries and features. Female directors in documentaries were 39% of the films that were released. Women directors of narratives were 18%. Now, I will never say that I want to see, a 50-50 or all men or all women directing films. I'm just looking for a balance. I'm looking for a balance in point of view when I think of independent film. I kind of think of it as like a healthy diet. You've got your protein, your inspiring movie, message-driven movies. Then you got your fruits and vegetables, which are your documentaries. And you got your junk food, which is your blow-em-up, shoot-em-ups, right? So I'm just looking for a healthy, balanced diet. So out of all the movies that are targeted towards women, there's actually only 16% of movies are actually targeted towards women. And they are, again, 51% of the population. And they are the largest viral pushes on the internet. So there is a belief that in the Gina Davis Institute of Media and Gender, they point out that a lot of women will watch movies about men, but men won't watch films about women. But when we point out the fact that Hunger Games, Gravity, and Frozen did so well this year, it's giving that is becoming just a story of the past. So back to the study real quick of independent directors. All the key jobs on that actually double when it comes to percentage of women of working in independence versus the top 250. 31% of women work in key behind-the-scene roles in independent film. And that's compared with just 16% in Hollywood. So why are these numbers so different, right? Well, film festivals, as you know, not all of them get distribution. Not all of them appear at the box office. They go to video on demand or don't see the light of day or just DVD. So also, if you look at the box office, of the top 100 films, only 2 have a female director. Frozen, co-directed by Jennifer Lee, and which was number 4 at the box office last year. And the remake of Carrie by Kimberly Price was number 80. Those are your top 2 films last year directed by women. Now, 75% of the films that are released are independent. They are films being made outside the big 6 studio systems and their littler companies. Catherine Bigelow has never made a studio film. She independently finances her own projects, puts them together, gets the film made, then goes to a distributor with a package deal. And a lot of the distributors that she goes to are actually independent. She goes to Lionsgate, she goes to Summit. Now, I grew up in the golden age of indies, that's what I'm going to call it. I remember when Steven Soderbergh won at Cannes and at Sundance for Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Remember these days? He then went on to be nominated for an Academy Award. And that really put Miramax on the map, and it brought in Tarantino and it brought in Smith, who also did insanely well on the festival circuit. Soderbergh got a deal at Universal. Tarantino and Smith stayed with Miramax for a while, but eventually Smith went to Warner Brothers and Tarantino went to Sony. This wasn't happening much for women, but it was happening. Allison Anders, who did Gas, Food, and Lodging, she went on to do a film at Universal. Kimberly Pierce, who did Boys Don't Cry, went on to do this year's Carrie at MGM, which is owned by Sony. And Catherine Hardwicke and her indie film 13, she made Lords of Dogtown for Columbia. Now, in the last 5 years, the women who won at Sundance, not one of them has gotten a studio picture. Now, Sundance is an interesting case for 2 reasons. Number one, they release data, which is really nice. And number two, for 10 years, the majority of films that have shown at Sundance have been men. But this year, half of the films were directed by women. So, and those are the films that were actually in competition. So it's been an amazing turn and study looking at Sundance numbers. So I'm seeing less and less festival darlings, men and women, get studio pictures in recent years. Yes, they're getting distribution, and many of them are going on to do much more amazing work in indies. But what I'm saying here is we're not seeing our independent filmmakers become our Hollywood filmmakers. We're not seeing that glass ceiling any smaller between indie and studio. So I've given you a lot of numbers, and of course without slides and pictograms and outrageous hand movements, it can go in one ear and out the other. So let me give you my experience a little bit. I have directed 13 films, 12 short projects, and in the span of 7 years. I've worked freelance on over 50 projects. I've worked for VH1 and MTV, Discovery Channel, and made films here in Noblesville. When I was 10, I came out and said I wanted to be a director. I was immediately told that directing was for 40 and 50-year-old men. When I was 16, I enrolled in an improv class, and I wanted to know more of what actors go through on stage. I didn't want to be an actor. I just wanted to be able to go through that nakedness on stage and be able to communicate a little bit better. At the end of that class, I was told by my teacher to forget directing and do some acting because I just might see some money in that. When I was 17, I was told by my drama teacher that I would never succeed in filmmaking. When I was 18, before I moved to Los Angeles, the guiding words of wisdom was, "You'll be back," which I'm sure many of you have heard as well. When I was 19, I was told by my college professor that I would never make it as a filmmaker in the Hollywood system because I was female, and so I quit school. When I was 25, my first daughter was born, and my father was there, and he was just kind of nuzzling her and talking to her, kind of talking to himself almost in a way. And he said, "I wonder what she'll be." And without a hesitation, I said, "She will be whatever she wants in this world." And that was my wake-up call. Because how could I fully support her dreams and not become a naysayer like those in my life if I didn't go after what I always wanted and what I wanted to do? So I started to fight. I tried to find this balance between motherhood and filmmaking. And I was 29 when I made my first for reals movie. And I showed it at a film festival, and I showed it to a major audience, and I felt like I was no longer hiding. After the film showed, no one came, arrested me, and put me in dream jail. The world didn't end. It was quite an amazing thing. So I have made little projects, films for under $100. I screwed up privately, but I showed all my films publicly. I always put myself out there. This is what I'm trying. Watch me get better. Help me out, give me tips. This is a craft. This is something that you learn by doing. As my films got bigger and had more of a message, I started to face bullying. I faced bullying so tremendous that I was actually in therapy for months. I've been called bitch, crazy, unstable. A nursemaid to a bunch of nuts is my favorite. That's a good one. Nice. I should get it on a t-shirt. When stressing a point of view, I've been asked, "Are you on the rag or something?" Once my film started winning awards and playing nationally, I started to hear, "Who does she think she is?" I've even had filmmakers say they'd be happy if I never made another film. On many sets beside the actresses, I'm usually the only female on set, and it's been assumed that I know how to do makeup because I'm female. It's been assumed that I can whip up food for 15 people, again, because I'm female. Now, by the way, I can.
I want a cheeseburger. Fries.
So, in this industry, you do have to be thick-skinned, but you don't have to be a round peg in a square hole. When I first started working freelance as like a script supervisor or a production assistant, I tried very hard just to fit in. I didn't want anybody to notice that I was female. I cut my hair short, I didn't wear makeup on set, I never wore a dress, I carried a messenger bag instead of a purse. I've heard my fair share of dick jokes. And I have seen crew members hitting on actresses that really weren't digging it. But I remember, you know what I'm talking about. But I remember when it all changed for me. I was on a set, and there was 3 female crew members. I think at that point that was the largest amount of female crew members I had ever been with. And there was a semi-nude scene in the film between 3 actresses. And one of the actresses came up to me really nervous, and she asked if only the women of the crew could be in the room and have like the DP in the because the window, it was being shot through a window, and have the director and the DP be the only ones because they were extremely nervous. So the AD decided to take over the boom duties and be right up in there. It got so uncomfortable in that room. It got really, really tense, and of course nobody spoke of it. Later in that same movie, when our actor needed to be in his underwear, there was no clothes set, there was no special consideration, and when he pointed out, hey, why is everybody here when I'm in my underpants? I started feeling a little bit guilty and a little bit ashamed that I didn't stand up for the actors in either situation, because I was just trying to fit in. I was trying not to rock the boat, I was trying not to bring too much attention to myself, and worst of all, I didn't want to be labeled as difficult. So I've learned that when you are standing up for your fellow actors or your fellow crew persons, who cares about being labeled as difficult? Was it Winston Churchill who says, you've got enemies? Good. It means you stood up for something once in your life. Women working in film should never feel like they don't fit. They have every right to do the job that they were hired to do. I realize many sets are inclusive and collaborative, but all it takes is one bad set, the one toxic situation, to make you question why you have signed up voluntarily to be treated so badly. And if you're not careful, you bring that baggage to your next set and the next works you do. So for over a year now, Chris Eller of IFN Bloomington, he was the first one to ask me to kind of talk about this topic of female directors. And my first response was, I've kind of been too busy directing to really think about talking about it. But he gave me 3 months and urged me to talk about this. And since then, I've been talking at film festivals and organizations and conventions and professional organizations as well. And I have talked to too many women who are giving up on their artistic talents because they don't believe in themselves enough. They think they have to know everything about everything. They think that no one will notice them, or that they've had a really bad experience on a set and they don't want to go through that. Notice none of them are ever saying they don't have the talent or passion. I want you to know something about women, let me just tell you, that they are amazing creatures and they are amazingly physically and mentally strong. And if you give them a chance, they are unstoppable. Many just aren't given that chance. So I've seen my daughters grow up. I have, actually my daughter's 6 and 11. I have 2 little ones. And I have seen them grow up, and I have seen their spirit so strong that they're going to conquer the world, that they're going to be superheroes. I absolutely love that. But once they face a toxic environment, like bullying at the playground, they start shrinking. I've seen this with grown women in my life as well. When things get hard or toxic, we start to shrink. We want to take up as little space as possible. We try not to ruffle feathers. We even try not to eat too much. We put our energy into others other than ourselves because maybe we're not worth it, right? So until we decide that our space is valuable and our voices are valuable and that we can help and we can help others. And when we help others, we end up actually rescuing ourselves. So at the end of my talks, I like to offer solutions. Otherwise, it's a Debbie Downer. So this is what I suggest. I don't like being a Debbie Downer. So this is what I suggest to Hollywood and the Big Six. Because if they really want to change the fact that only 6% of directors in Hollywood are female, and from all aspects of my research, they're not embarrassed by it. They don't necessarily want to change it. But this is what I suggest anyway, to the wind. They need to actually take a look at what NASA is doing. NASA has a program called Women at NASA. They have a website dedicated to their female leaders of past and present. They have profiles, interviews, and videos, a list of career forums, educational games and activities, and an outreach program. NASA actually goes to middle schools, and they talk to girls about being a part of NASA and looking at STEM fields. They are not actively just saying, we want more women in NASA. They're laying the groundwork for young ladies to start to work on their math and science and embrace their potential at early ages to make that dream a reality. And they're not just looking for astronauts. They're also looking for engineers and astronomers and researchers and chemists, etc. One statistic in 2011 said that women are 33% of the leadership positions at NASA. That is double what the Hollywood industry has, and they're just getting started. So what if the Big Six got together and did a, Women at Film, and they showcased their industry pioneers, like Alice Guy Blanchet. It's French. I always want to say Alice Guy Blanche because I'm so American. She actually made the first narrative film. Not the first woman to make a narrative film, the first narrative film. Louise Weber was the first to experiment with sound. Same thing, not first woman, first person to experiment with sound. Dorothy Arzneer was the first woman in the DGA, and she was credited for inventing the boom mic. Women at the turn of the century were in equal number to men in releasing movies and profitability at the theaters. They were the main innovators that were pushing technology forward to tell a new story. They were looking forward to 3D. They were looking forward to new ways to encapsulate an audience in the full experience. They were doing more before they even had a right to vote, and nowadays we have forgotten about them. So programs like NASA has, even programs like Save the Music have, the Big Six could go into schools and teach kids about filmmaking, how it's teamwork, how it's collaboration, and how it's a way to create a visual story. If Hollywood celebrated their female counterparts at the turn of the century and the innovations that they encouraged, they would make a place for not only more female innovators, but for all innovators, to push the technology forward, to see what more we can do, to tell a better story. And I think if they did that, it would probably be more powerful than any movie they've been putting out lately. But that's just me. This would change things because the first step in a problem is acknowledging there is a problem in the first place. My solution for independent filmmakers: keep doing what you're doing, honestly. Make films, team together, share your resources, share what works, share what doesn't work. Share each other's films, support each other financially, publicly, and personally. Madeleine Albright has a quote that I've been using a little bit too much, but I love it. There is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. Just saying. It's true. When we believe in each other and when we work together, we create a stronger voice. And we don't feel so alone. We don't look at that 6% and go, oh, there's not a place at the table for me. Also, the reign of the queen bee is over. I'm just letting you know. This phenomenon in management where there can only be one woman at the top is dying out because it's toxic and it doesn't actually help innovation move forward. By doing that, they're only reaching 49% of the population and only 15% of the buyers. So it's not working and it's dying out. The Hollywood system for making money at films, it doesn't necessarily work. And in independence, it's even harder. Creating a new model, sharing it with people. Honestly, I think there should be like a Nobel Prize or a Pulitzer Prize for somebody figuring out how you can have repeated success in independent film. That would be awesome. But the other thing I recommend is to mentor. If you're a costumer or a director or a set designer, be a mentor to a female student or a female who's starting out in the business. Because this is a craft and we learn most by doing. We also learn by how we work with other people and how to navigate this complicated world of creative personalities. Because we're all creative, we all get heated, we all have our setbacks and our successes, and we are some difficult people a lot of the times. If we weren't, we'd all be in the medical field. I mean, if it was, if it was really easy, that's what we're doing. My solution for film fans, especially for to see more films directed by women, is to actually see more films directed by women. Seek them out at film festivals. Look for them in your Netflix queue. Share those films with your friends, because odds are there is no marketing program behind any of these films, and they're looking for somebody to find it and campaign it and push it out there a little bit more. Buy the DVDs, because the DVD is a vote. It is saying this art has matter. You put your money down, that money, big or small, might lead to that artist's next movie. And that's what you're investing in. That's what you're paying it forward in. The next thing is become familiar with the Bechdel test. You've heard me talk about it a little bit. Has anybody heard of the Bechdel test before? All right, okay, that's better than normal. It's getting around, that's good. So the Bechdel test was developed by Alison Bechdel, who is a cartoonist. And she overheard a conversation of two women talking about films. And so she developed this test. It's super simple, 3 questions. And it is on her website. And how they do it, it's really democratic and quite fun, is you go on the website, you look for the film that you just saw. If it's not there, you add it. And you say whether it is a 0 out of 3, 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3. And then you debate. You don't have to stay for the debate, but it is quite fun. So some of these are always, contended. So here are the 3 questions. Are there 2 named women in the film? Names. Not secretary, not mom, not nurse. Names. Number 2, do they talk to each other at any point in the film? Number 3, when they talk to each other, is it something other than a man? Seems pretty simple, right? You would be shocked of how many movies actually fail this test. And I don't know about you, but I live in a world where there are women who have names who talk to each other. I'm just letting you know, I also run a women's group, and we have a topic every month, and let me tell you, it's very rarely ever about men. For the 2nd year in a row of the Best Picture nominees, 5 of the 9 nominees have failed the Bechdel test. And the films that pass are like, just barely. I mean, it's a sentence, or they talk about nail polish, or, it's like embarrassingly small. And the technicalities are wonderful, Well, they talk about their son. So is their son considered talking about a man? Oh my God. The funniest one is her. Her. Is her a woman? Because she's an iOS. She's Siri. Oh my God. So they're quite fun. But still, 5 of the 9 fail. And the ones that pass barely pass. I think it's an utter simple formula. And it is like the bare minimum of what women are looking to see in cinema. I don't know about you, but I have daughters, and I want them to be able to see films where women have names and talk to each other about important stuff. Stuff that drives the plot forward, things like that. But get this, there is an excellent article on thebechdeltest.com, and it talks about how at UCLA they were telling students to not pass the Bechdel test. Even if it furthered the story, they were encouraged to leave all passing of the Bechdel test out. And you can read more about that and in consequential articles on the site. But I think those days are actually disappearing. So this is what I'm thinking. Because nowadays, we actually have a chain of theaters in Sweden that is posting not only the rating to the movie, but the pass or fail of the Bechdel test. And it's awesome. We're also starting to see in the handout of the top 50 movies that do pass the Bechdel test, making tremendous more money than the films that don't. So I still want to believe that Hollywood is a business and that money talks. And if we follow the formula that Hollywood has told us that they follow, and we look at female protagonists in Gravity and Hunger Games and Frozen that have brought in a lot of money and got a lot of people talking, we will start seeing the buying power of women at the box office, the sales counter, and social media. And my hope is that it's only a matter of time before we see more female voices out there in front of the camera and behind the camera, giving new point of views to storytelling of just who we are as human beings on this planet. So that is me. I will open it up for questions.